Bar don't look too shabby. Oh, I'm into bars. Let's see. Does this have a? Okay, so a kind of hammered. Wow, wow. Hi, I'm Scav and I'm an architecture critic. Welcome to the Extra Office, a channel where I talk about the architecture in video games. Today, I want to talk to you about Cyberpunk 2077, one of the most anticipated games of all time. Now, the game's criticism of contemporary culture mostly falls flat for reasons I'll get into, but it also inadvertently has some pretty scathing things to say about architecture today. Let's get into it. I know what you're wondering, and the answer is medium and circumcised. These are just a couple of characteristics that play a part in determining the outcome of Cyberpunk 2077. As a player, you experience the main storyline through a gender-fluid avatar named V. The game's namesake stems from a science fiction genre that at its core presents a dystopian, hyper-capitalist society intended as a reflective critique of contemporary life. Think Philip K. Dick's work or Ernest Cline's Ready Player One. There are plenty of well-documented issues pertaining to the game, from its perpetuation of techno-orientalism and science fiction to a buggy release resulting in too much attention on the phallic options I described earlier. The game takes place in Night City, a Northern California city-state that has ceded its government to the 5 largest corporations. And I want to talk about V's apartment a little bit. V's apartment consists of a single open area with multiple small rooms plugged into its perimeter, reminiscent of Japanese metabolist architecture, despite its location in the Little China neighborhood. The shower, toilet, and bathroom sink plug-in rooms are ganged together and result in a rather generous wet space on one side. A wet space is what we would call all of the sort of plumbing area. To the other is a conversation pit, very cool, with seating for guests, a television hanging in the corner which plays surreal advertisements. Behind another glass door is a large storage room holding accoutrements needed to traverse the town. Weapons. Lots of them. This apartment feels way too large for a few reasons. These tiles are about 14 inches end to end. I've determined that the apartment is 28 tiles in this direction staggered by 34 tiles end to end in this direction. Now the unit clocks in at 1345 square feet, and just out of my own sick curiosity here, that places it in 2018 California rental prices at $2,900 a month, and extrapolated out with inflation to 2077, about $11,500 a month in rent. I certainly felt like the size of the apartment is a little unrealistic for V's outset as a lowly street mercenary, but more importantly, I couldn't help but think how pleasing it would be to experience the cramped living spaces seen by Deckard in Blade Runner. The iconic scenes in the original 1982 film used Frank Lloyd Wright's Ennis house for the apartment complex's exterior and set the stage for a cluttered and dimly lit world whose excess accumulation of junk spilled into domestic life. If V's apartment was cramped, the architecture could express the pressures Night City thrusts upon you, and this would amplify the incredible threshold of the apartment's only window, a virtual example of prospect and refuge theory. Opening up this lone aperture reveals a spectacular view of Night City, a wondrous mountain of metabolist rip-off mashup buildings and British high-tech lookalikes. The structures are adorned with equipment reminiscent of a Thomas Struth photograph in their undefined function, coupled with a heightened aestheticization of functionality. Oh my god, that's beautiful. Now, before I move on, one detail I absolutely love is the burrito dispenser in the apartment, putting that pressure on you that I was discussing earlier. And also, for me, the programming on the television is absolutely unbelievable and kind of steals the show in a lot of ways. For example, this channel is called Just Ads. My only regret is that I can't play the television while I do the rest of the review. Now, like architecture, video games struggle to make provocative criticisms of contemporary life because both disciplines are tethered to an inescapable responsibility: video games to entertainment and architecture to service. You know, it costs $60 to play a game that shows a life experienced by poor folks every day. For example, right outside of V's apartment sits a bloated and broken trash chute distastefully mirroring the one described in the Pruitt-Igoe myth, which is a documentary about the, well, myth that public housing in the United States was a failure of modern architecture. It was, in fact, a failure of literal building services and community resources for political self-determination. Because this is already a hellish reality for many in 2020. But nonfiction doesn't sell. One of my favorite details is the fact that the elevator takes so long. You know, we get so used to video games giving us that instant gratification or instant travel. It really makes you wait, and I love that part about the game. Because honestly, the thing about video games is because they exist in digital space, real, actual distance is meaningless. But time, right? Time is where you can actually make distance as an experience occur. Now, stepping out of the apartment complex into Night City reveals a Pyrenean fever dream. The sky is filled with shipping barges, while pamphlets for discount synth burritos stick to the pavement under my feet. The metropolis pulses with deals, desperation, and death. I step forward and see the first distinct work of architecture in the game space. Bright orange panels, articulated with a Voronoi triangulation, form the cascading exterior of a short building in what is otherwise a hulking and tall urban environment. What this reveals isn't simply what architecture in 2077 might look like to a concept artist. It shows a dystopia where architecture isn't widely seen in the public consciousness as a tool of liberation, but of oppression to be wielded by the wealthy elite. Turns out, the building in question belongs to the Night City Police Department. The defenders of corporate interests are allowed some cheap parametricism as a treat. This is consistent with Corpo mouthpiece Patrick Schumacher, who once told me that architecture only exists in the outer eighth inch of a building skin. The game gets major points for that one. As I stroll through the rest of Corpo Plaza in the city center, I am unsurprisingly disrupted by catcalling joy toys, armed robberies, and street vendors. Small market stalls fill any available neglected urban space, resulting in an enjoyable level of navigational disarray. There are 4 varieties of stylistic identity used in the construction of the game: entropism, kitsch, neo-militarism, and neo-kitsch. Those translated to various clothing lines and in-game vehicle brands, but it's unclear what those terms might mean for the built environment. From what I can tell, the districts in the city are only distinguished through variations in hostile benches that accompany minor shifts in scale and ornamentation. They did make a couple of really beautiful speculations. For example, the corner of this building I absolutely adore, where it's filled with sex workers. However, on an urban scale, it doesn't really work, because this building doesn't face anything like a banking tower or something, or an office building, that could really take advantage of those views. So that kind of bugs me. However, things like this hulking project in the sky above us very much redeem it in user experience. Among the various design disciplines in Cyberpunk that were afforded speculation, advertising, automotive, and transhumanist fashion are paid a lot more attention than architecture. This resulted in a kind of disappointing confrontation at the Arasaka-owned Konpeki Plaza Hotel. This hotel is introduced as a premier waterfront hotel in Night City, and it's an antagonist in and of itself during a significant mission in the early storyline. Yet, it looks like a 3D model purchased on Fiverr. No offense to my friends on Fiverr. The hotel sports a poorly supported trellis structure out front, which ends up making an appearance inside of the rooms themselves as a floating ceiling crowned by a single uncomfortable can light. Yo, guys, here it is. Is this a sprinkler? Is this a no-show sprinkler? Or is that supposed to be an LED light? That's a light. It's a can light. Pink. The lobby is organized around a strong linear demarcation on the floor, which moves toward the rear of the space and goes up the wall and out a window. Yet, to my dismay, the continuity of this most important line in the building is ignored as it turns up the wall. The panels are incompetently misaligned. Is anyone else just absolutely triggered right now with this? Now, I could go on, but the point is that the credibility of the environment and the possibility for it to hold a critique melt away as I notice additional mistakes in the 3D model everywhere. And these have been well documented, but things like, benches colliding with a retaining wall, or how are you gonna append a bench to a bench? Like, what's going on here? Handrails that don't have a support mechanism. Now, these gaffes focus our attention on the execution of the 3D model itself, like how poor CGI effects can ruin an otherwise enthralling film. Now, I'll admit, some of these mistakes, however, are indistinguishable from what one might expect from a city-state powered by corporations with a profits over people mentality. I see. This is probably unintentional, but it's an exactly the kind of thing that would happen here. The interests of whatever, and I don't want to do this, but whatever this building is, I knew it had to be huge. The interests of what whoever built this, are colliding with the public interest and the public good. Now, mirroring Night City's underfunded and uncared for municipal space, the crunch staff at CD Projekt Red make a perfect match to be the builders of this world, because the conditions of their labor reflect those kinds of conditions in Night City. 6-day work weeks were required for most of the staff during the months leading up to the release of the game. This resulted in a mistake-laden architecture unconvincingly disguised as a city with a negligent life safety code. Cyberpunk 2077 is a great example of late capitalism's ability to turn commentary into a commodifiable aesthetic experience. Its spaces invite criticism for their incompleteness, but they also offer a sinister relationship between architecture and the plight of contemporary society. The discipline as we know it today is warped by the figure of the starchitect and by the increasingly great lengths that companies go to secure business, even with shady clients. It was Philip Johnson who said, "The people with money to build today are corporations. They are our popes and Medicis." In the past year, we've seen Bjarke Ingels photographed with Jair Bolsonaro. Major British firms like Foster & Partners pull out of the climate agreement architects declare, and personal heroes of mine, Coop Himmelblau, designing an opera house in Russia-occupied Crimea. Such a business-forward attitude leaves architecture as a transactional exchange, with certain ingrained political and institutional alliances and exceedingly slim potential for its use as a critical tool. Now, this condition suffocates any imagination of an alternative world, even when playing one in a video game. In addition to the Municipal Plans Examiner, it might be useful to interrogate Night City's architects who produced its buildings, assuming architects were even involved. The game is an outdated critique on culture as a whole, but its disinterest and underinvestment in its architectural presentation is something architects should consider a serious challenge. It isn't just that architecture is impotent in the Cyberpunk 2077 universe. That's, of course, by design. It's that architecture today is missing out on the opportunity to take a part in the creation of alternative critical worlds. Thanks so much for listening. As always, please like, share, and subscribe to get more videos like this. Comment down below what game you think I should do next. Come and find me on Patreon to support my work and this channel, or come find me on Twitch to join in on the fun. Thanks so much.